Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak on Trust Television. We are starting on a different note on the 1st of May, 2023. We have moved this morning show to now begin by 8 a.m. So that all of you can be part of whatever we offer. First, you get the opportunity to enjoy your sleep as much as possible and get the opportunity to be part of everything that we have to offer you. And what a better day to begin than a day that is set aside for workers across the world. I am Sunday Michael Ogu, and today promises to be very interesting.
And I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. Indeed, it's a beautiful day, a great opportunity, especially for workers to sit back, relax, and watch us. Interestingly, everyone else is on public holiday except for us, the journalists, who always have to be on air, put up the work, and, you know, the TV never gets shut, you know.
Absolutely. And I mean, talking about journalists always been there, I think it's another opportunity to also chip in the journalist welfare.
Yes.
In the scheme of
very important, because the journalists get to talk about the welfare of virtually everyone.
Absolutely.
Journalists talk about the welfare of teachers, talk about the welfare of nurses, talk about, you know, virtually everyone. But who talks about the welfare of journalists?
Absolutely. The journalist feels like the cameraman who captures memory for everybody, but he's not part of that memory. You never get to see him in the picture. I hope society appreciates what...
I'm just imagining a day the journalists would down tools and decided, look, we are shutting down. We are going on a strike. So there's no TV, there's no paper, there's no information anywhere. Information blackout, really. And I'm just wondering what the society will look like, or what the country, Nigeria, will look like without the role that journalists play.
You can begin to imagine it. It would be like a bleak world. Even if you wink, nobody would notice. People don't completely understand how much sacrifices we make to make their day worthwhile, bringing information, entertainment, and education to their doorsteps. And I mean, those events, we've had critical events in the world that reinstates the place of journalists. During the shutdown, you could do nothing else other than watch your television set.
Exactly. Everyone was on lockdown, so nowhere to even, I mean, you could only rely on your phone perhaps, but then these days, you know, with the trend of fake news, then you better watch it, because you never know who is feeding with what information.
Absolutely. So as the government around the world tinker around what they can do for workers, they should also remember essential workers like journalists. We are also part of the workforce, and we deserve better.
And journalism is not a crime, by the way.
Absolutely.
Journalism is not, it's you know, our partners. Journalists are partners with government, with institutions. They are not enemies of institutions. So intimidating journalists, fighting and suppressing, you know, the rights of journalists, I think is not the way to go for a country to progress, especially in a democratic setting.
Absolutely true, and it is on this note that we begin today's show by bringing you the highlights of what we have today. And starting with the first one, stop total shutdown of varsities to make demand. Issa Aremu tells ASU others.
May Day. Autumn thanks Benway workers, lauds their resilience and support.
And CP orders arrest of drunk policeman who messed up self in uniform.
Now the details. Director General of the Michael Imodu International Institute for Labor Studies, Ilorin, Comrade Issa Aremu, has cautioned trade unions against total shutdown of tertiary institutions during strike actions. Speaking at a colloquium organized by the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SANU, Federal University of Technology, Akure, Futa, said that the unions should understand that industrial dispute was not industrial war. He reminded the varsity unions that former national president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Adams Oshomole, never get any agreement from employers by shutting down factories in their days as textile union leaders. He urged them to find ways to return to the good old days that will not lead to total closure of schools during strike action. According to him, unions should imbibe the culture of social dialogue and be prepared for compromise. He added that he said that that's why they will not get what just ignore that.
All right, moving on. As Nigerian workers join the rest of the world to celebrate Workers' Day, Governor Samuel Otom of Benue State has thanked Benue workers and commended them for their resilience and unalloyed support for his government over the years in the face of obvious challenges. While noting that the last 8 years had been challenging, the governor lauded the workers for keeping the wheels of the state alive. Governor Otom, in a solidarity message to workers issued on Sunday by his Chief Press Secretary, Nathaniel Ikyo, in commemoration of the 2023 Workers' Day celebration, said in spite of the harsh economic environment, Benue workers had remained undaunted and faithful. While thanking the Benue civil servant for their hard work, dedication, and unwavering commitment to making the state a better place, he was honored to serve as their governor.
Right now, the Kwara State Commissioner of Police, Paul Odama, has ordered the arrest of Stephen Yohana, an inspector under his command. In a video seen by our correspondent, Yohana was seen acting under alcoholic influence. Now, he urinated and excreted in his uniform while being held by two of his colleagues. After viewing the video, CP Paul Odama swiftly directed that the policeman be identified and arrested. It was observed that his case is more medical than alcoholic, and the result of his medical examination will determine the next action to be taken against him. Consequently, the CP directed that the inspector be put under close observation by his immediate supervisor, the Divisional Police Officer of Share Division, pending the conclusion of his treatment.
And that's it on our news highlight on the hour. Moving on to our packages this morning, the federal government has given a breakdown of the $1.2 million spent on the bus fare to evacuate stranded Nigerians from Sudan to Egypt borders for onward airlifting to Nigeria. The Permanent Secretary of the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry and Chair of the Situation Room on the evacuations of Nigerians from Sudan, Nasir Sani Gwarzo, gave the explanation in Abuja. Dr. Sani Gwarzo explained that $30,000 was paid per bus and that 40 buses were procured for the proper evacuation of the stranded Nigerian citizens in Sudan. He also explained that the delay experienced by Nigerians at the Egyptian border, delayed payment caused by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and the request for visa payments by the Egyptian government. According to him, the owners of the buses demanded complete payment, noting that sending money to Sudan cannot be done directly but through middlemen. He quickly added that the Department of State Services and the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit had been carried along in the payment process.
It's only for one item, for the buses. Do you know how much it takes to hire a bus from Khartoum to the border? $30,000 per bus. $30,000 per bus times 40 buses. Can somebody, any good mathematician amongst you? That is not billion. Billion. Yes. That is where your 1.2 million comes into. We now mobilized the first tranche approved by federal government out of this, which is $400,000, and transferred it. If you take out $400,000, what does it come to?
800,000.
No, 1/3. Yes. Of the total. Once they gave us 13 buses, 13 buses times $30,000 is how much? 390. 30. Can somebody calculate for me?
That's 390 is correct.
390. they stopped giving us. You remember I told you they gave us 13,000. They're supposed to give us 13 point something buses. They kept the 10,000. When you are traveling in Sudan, you don't enter a bus and start going. You must load it with water and biscuits. Yes. Believe me, I just became an expert on Sudan overnight because every day we discuss with them. And they told us our money is finished, bring another money. We now transferred the balance, started transferring the balance in tranches. And believe me, you don't transfer money to Sudan directly. You have to get somebody who knows the company who will transfer and give cash. Then you go into agreement. We signed an MOU. I have those signed MOUs with us. And at every stage, I report this to DSS and NFIU so that they can monitor the movement of the money. And so that, do you know that in Nigeria, if you transfer money from government account, it does not click because it has a dashboard that can be seen. They will stop it. So we have to alert them. And we send this money, and it got delayed.
Well, a lot of revelations coming out from that press conference there by the DG NEMA, giving an update on the situation of Nigerian students who are stranded between the Egypt-Sudan border at the moment. We've been expecting their arrival to the country since Friday. The federal government the last time said that the students will arrive. About 1,500 of them will arrive the country by Friday, but apparently that is not happening now. It looks like, I don't know where that statement came from, actually.
It's amazing what we are seeing, because every time we have taken a briefing from this incident, it's about how much money the government has spent. It's not about what is the situation of the Nigerians that are trapped. It's always about, we have marked 1.2 million, we have spent $400,000, and these students are not here. Whatever you are telling us or telling the parents of this student at this time would amount to nothing except we see them here. So this question of bus drivers absconding, bus drivers returning, they refuse to drive past the borders, they're asking for visas. We are behaving as if we have no diplomatic ties with Egypt or even Ethiopia, and that there's nothing that.
And at the moment, it looks like all channels of communications are broken down, because yes, we have an embassy in Sudan, but with no government in place at the moment, because that's what the situation is like in Sudan at the moment. No government in place. So who do you talk to? Who are you in communication with? And between the embassy in Sudan and our own domestic institutions here, the NEMA, the NITCOM, you tend to hear different tunes. You know, the NITCOM says one thing, NEMA says another, and the embassy in Sudan says a different thing. So the Sudan ambassador yesterday said that, well, the money doesn't go through them, that they have nothing to do with the money. They are only responsible for making the logistics arrangements and the rest of them. So you wonder, who is the person in the middle between the Nigerian government and the bus drivers there? I mean, we are talking about huge cash here, huge amount of money. 13 million naira. If you convert that, you said $30,000 for a single bus, that's 13 million naira. So you could imagine, you know, how much money is going into all of this, and yet there is no, you know, apparent direction as to where we are heading. We hope that these students get back as soon as possible.
Absolutely. We can't say more. The whole story, like I said, would amount to nothing until we bring these students safely back home.
All right. Hopefully we'll be joining for updates much later on the program. But now let's take a look at this story. The National Population Commission, NPC, says it is prepared for the 2023 population and housing census, which has been postponed by the federal government. The Director of Public Affairs of the Commission, Isiaka Yahaya, disclosed this while addressing journalists in Abuja. Take a look.
The National Population Director, Public Affairs Isiaka Yahya, said the NPC is fully prepared to carry out its functions, despite the rescheduling of the 2023 National Population and Housing Census. Yahya dispelled insinuation that it was because the Commission was not financially prepared to carry out its responsibility that led to the postponement, adding that federal government has right to postpone the exercise and fix a new date. The Director of Public Affairs attributed the postponement to the rescheduling of governorship elections.
But the second point, it's also different from what is happening, the mood of the nation. Having conducted the election, we thought there would be, in fixing the census, the census after the election, we were just ready to move. So the issue of not being prepared is not a sort of it. Of course, you may say because we did not do the LGA training, maybe it means unprepared. Rather, the answer is no, because some of the thoughts that inform the postponement, were unfolding.
Census Manager Abubakar Jalingo, who also confirmed the Commission's readiness, added that database has to be attached to the population to get the required number of the population.
The National Population Commission is technically ready to implement the census. And I'm happy that you people are all familiar press to the Commission. You have followed our footprints to the process and to the methodological implementation of the census process.
Has been functional, while personnel recruitment has been scrutinized.
When you come to our preparedness in terms of internet connectivity and all this for the census, as I told you, we have the database of all network masts in this country. We know where they are physically located on ground in this country. We have collected the database of the coverage from all the telcos.
The Commission has put in place complaint portals and platforms to make Commission get back to the drawing board by receiving feedback and taking necessary corrections where necessary before the head count. Kabir Lawal, Trust TV News, Abuja.
All right, moving on. The residents of Jos, the capital of Plateau State, have expressed disappointment over the postponement of the 2023 population and housing census by the federal government. The 2023 census had been earlier scheduled for the 3rd to the 7th of May this year, but on Saturday, the federal government announced a shift in the date, adding that the new date will be decided by the incoming administration. Ado Musa completes the story.
This is the third time the federal government is postponing the exercise. Unlike the last postponement, this time no clear reason was given to Nigerians on why the exercise was postponed. Neither was a new date for the exercise selected. Census is usually organized to collect up-to-date data that will drive the developmental goals of the country and improve the living standard of the Nigerian people. However, some residents say the development is surprising and disappointing.
And honestly, I think the census, the postponement of the census is a very, very bad idea, because we need to know how many people we have in Nigeria, and you can't plan if you don't know the number of people you're planning for. For example, if you're planning an event, you have to know the budget or the number of people you're expecting to be able to plan well for them.
The saddest part of it is, yet no reason is given from the side of the government trying to convince the citizens that these are the reasons why this census is postponed.
The residents also call on the federal government to reconsider the decision and conduct the exercise as scheduled.
Since they've done everything already, I don't know what is stopping them from doing it. If possible, I think the federal government should go ahead and carry out the census. I don't know the exact reason why they are stopping it, but they should try and carry out the census.
They should try and intimate people about the reasons behind the postponement of this census, because people need to be convinced that there are cogent reasons for this census to be postponed for no reason.
Badamasi Saidu is a lecturer at the Department of Geography, Federal University Kashere, and explains why government should conduct the exercise at this present time.
In the first instance, when you are getting information about persons, you need to know the sex and ages of all categories of people in the country, because the need of the infants is quite different from the needs of children in primary school. The need of those in secondary schools is different from the need of those in the universities at that age group. And it's equally different from the needs of the working class. And is equally different from the needs of the adults. So all these things are very much important in planning. The needs of females are also different from the needs of the males.
In the last 17 years, the federal government hasn't conducted the population and housing census to enable it to have accurate figure of the country's population for future planning. Ado Musa, Trust TV News, Jos.
Now, an internally displaced teenager in Borno State says he wants to make life easier for his state and the country at large through engineering. He is Sadiq Alhaji Mala, a 15-year-old boy with exceptional abilities which enable him build lots of things with improvised materials. Beatrice Kuruti tells us more.
At the peak of the insurgency in the northeast region, Abadam local government was not spared from Boko Haram attacks and destruction which displaced thousands of communities in 2014. The parents of 15-year-old Sadiq Mala were also affected as they were forced to relocate to Auno in Maiduguri. Despite the financial challenges that hampered his desire to further his education, Sadiq has a unique ability of constructing replicas of machines and tools with improvised materials. His fabrications include aeroplanes, tricycles, cars, and many more.
In na kwanta da haka sai na tashi da safe sai in ji abin ya zo min.
Some nights in my sleep, I dream of innovative things, and when I wake up, I fabricate it. I get my materials using the money I make from hawking sachet water. I split the money to two, one for my mom, then the other I save it to get these items. I dropped out of school because there is no money to start secondary school education. He believes that when he becomes an engineer, his inventions in the future would make life easier for people, as inspired by the good works of the state governor, who is his role model.
Suma da nake duk da na taimakon mutane ne.
I admire what the governor is doing in the state, helping people, especially those displaced. He is an engineer. I want to be one also. I want to invent things too, like the tractor I made. It's something to help local farmers and reduce manual farming. I want to invent things that will carry out difficult tasks. Sadiq's mother is seeking support from well-meaningful individuals to make her son's dream a reality.
Sai na ce mishi abba kai yaro ne tukuna za ka yi wasa, sai ya ce mama ba wasa ba, wannan abun in Allah ya yarda.
When he started constructing prototypes of machines, I frowned at him because they are just toys. But when I saw them functioning like real things, I was surprised. It made me believe in his efforts. I really want him to further his education. Since we left the IDP camp, I've been into farming, but it's not enough to raise the money for his education. And I am not doing any business to support him and the family. Just as other kids of his age attend school every day, Sadiq Mala spends time fabricating something new to fuel his passion, with the hope that a day will come when his dreams will come to pass. Beatrice Kuruti, Trust TV News, Maiduguri.
All right, very interesting reports with Sadiq. We hope that relevant government agencies or even the state government will pick up those interesting talents that this boy has exhibited and find a way of developing it and harnessing it for our national good. That's the talent wasting at home, right there with Sadiq. And that brings us to the end of our packages. At this moment, we will take a short breather. When we return, there's more to come from Daybreak. Please stay with us.
necessarily tribal or regional.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak to have a sense of what the papers are saying this morning about our country and our countrymen. The beginning is the Daily Trust newspaper, is what we start with, and the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Over 500 Nigerian students stranded at Sudan-Egypt border. It has writers that says, our passports seized, we have no food, water, students say. And that's according to the students in Sudan. We are doing our best, envoy. NAV planes land in Egypt. Ceasefire ends. Dangote partners FG. Air peace on resettling evacuees. So the ceasefire ends today. You could see a pictorial there. Showing you Saudi Royal Navy officers assist a child on board their ship as they evacuate Saudis and other nationals from Sudan. Stranded Nigerian students in a bus. So these are the two pictures side by side. Also you have above the lead story, agents kick over 100% increase in cargo handling charges. And then you also have we are ready for census, awaiting Tinubu, NPC says, and that's on page 5. Drunk Kwara police officer excretes in uniform. CP orders arrest. You'd find that on page 17. Now, below the pictorial, you'd also see other stories that says, bandits kill 40 in Kebbi and Zamfara. Edo farmer commits suicide after stabbing wife over infidelity. And that's on page 16. 4.3 million face severe hunger in Borno, Adamawa, Yobe, WFP, World Food Program, that is. Now you have also APC, legal advisor seeks Northwest Vice Chair's expulsion. And that's on page 10, talking about political stories. These are the main stories on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
All right, we'll move on to Nigeria News Direct this morning, and it is staying with a different kind of story as the major headline. No plans to phase out redesigned Naira notes. And that is coming from the Central Bank of Nigeria. And to other stories, inside sources clarify falsehood, media attacks against Polaris Bank. Zenith Bank achieves remarkable 41% growth in gross earnings in Q1 2023. That's quarter 1 2023. And 4 trillion debt recovery. Don't allow few individuals escape with our Commonwealth. And this is coming from the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. And we have front page pictures there. One of the new Commissioner of Police, Ogun State Command, Yomi, being received by the State Governor, Prince Dapo Abiodun, at the Governor's office in Okemesa, Abeokuta yesterday, as well as the Executive Vice Chair, Nigeria Communications Commission, Professor Umar Ambata, with former Minister of Agriculture, Alhaji Sani Zangondara, at the residence of Alhaji Musa Gwadebi, former Minister of Labor, during a condolence visit yesterday.
All right. Let's take a look at another paper now. We're talking about the Blueprint newspaper this morning. On the Blueprint newspaper, we have the lead story that says, suit against Adamu's breaches. APC recommends Lukman's expulsion as internal crisis deepens. To invoke party's constitution over NWC members' court action. I'm not threatened. Memo mere opinion, says Lukman. 10th National Assembly, APC members write Adamu, back Akpabio, Jibrin leadership. You also have take advantage of Betara's acceptability, APC urged. You'd find all the details on page 6. Now, directly below the masthead, Buhari's remarks, accept defeat, you lost woefully, Lai tells Atiku and Obi. You have also another story there beside the pictorial. Sudan crisis, Egyptian officials making evacuation of Nigerians difficult. That's according to the federal government. And an indictment, really, if you may, on the Egyptian officials. Well, you also have another story, how Nigeria can address economic challenges, according to World Bank. Lawan Atiku tasked Nigerian workers on hope, hard work. Why Buhari extended CG immigration, Jerry's tenure. You also have AMCON urges accelerated measures to recover 4 trillion naira debt. Police reject 1 million naira bribe, arrest notorious ritualist in Ogun. Group rejects Seplat succession plan, alleges tenure elongation. So the police officer rejecting 1 million naira, I think that's a big story.
It is.
And we should commend the police officer, but we'll look much more into that story later, shortly.
All right, we move on to the Punch newspaper next, and it is keeping faith with the Workers' Day celebration. 8 years scorecard, workers lament hardship, score Buhari governors low on welfare. High cost of living has made nonsense of the minimum wage. 40% pay rise, according to union. Pensioners still earning 500, 750 naira monthly. Economy harsh under Buhari, says retiree. And two other stories there. Unsold goods stock rises by 52%. That's according to manufacturers. Don't attack embassy staff. Ambassadors warn stranded Nigerian students. And FG dumps 5% telecom tax waiver. To other story, opposition rigging claim is fraudulent, according to the federal government. 2 suspects caught concealing cannabis in Gary sacks, and siblings supplies more new naira notes to banks. These are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper.
All right. Now let's look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. The lead story there, of course, as expected, the Workers' Day. It says, workers lament 8 years of unkept promises as minimum wage loses value. And that's on page 6. You also have below that again, Lagos-Ibadan road repair misses Fashola's deadline. While Lagos fund demolished buildings in Ajao Estate. You also have over 2,500 undocumented Nigerian students stranded in Sudan varsities. Nigeria loses $4.5 billion yearly to foreign artisans in construction industry. NIN issuance nears 100 million as government intensifies data harmonization. So that's some good story there. We'll say cheering story on the Guardian newspaper.
All right, we move on to the Vanguard newspaper this morning. May Day, it's been terrible, agonizing for workers. This is coming from the NLC. As workers in oil, electricity, maritime, other sectors grieve over continuous misery, poverty, hopelessness, asks governments to address poverty, insecurity, unemployment, inflation, high cost of living, set agenda for incoming government. And to another big story right there on the front page of the Vanguard, inflation, high interest rates drive stock market lows to 1.01 trillion in April. Market loses over 70% of Q1 gains. Analysts disagree on outlook for May. And then you find pictures there of the CBN governor and the CEO of the Nigerian Exchange, Oscar Onyema. And of course, the DG Securities and Exchange Commission, Lamido Yuguda. And to other stories, OPS, that's the organized private sector, urges federal government to suspend proposed new taxes. And Sudan, 637 Nigerians arrive Egyptian border, envoy assures parents and students. To other stories, 17 buildings marked for demolition in Anambra for harboring gunmen. And no plans to phase out redesigned Naira. On the 17th AFCON, Ugbede's Eaglet begin on a winning note. And to other stories, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, FG apologizes over failure to meet deadline. And Southeast governors, Igbo leaders inaugurate Iwanyanwu as new Ohaneze President General. Those are the major stories on the front page of the Vanguard.
All right. Now, on this day newspaper this morning, let's take a look at the lead story. It says NLC, CSO split with judiciary to save Nigeria's democracy. The writer says that INEC has driven a nail into the electoral coffin of the country. NLC threatens to name, shame corrupt judges. You also have TUC kicks against planned privatization of TCN, NIPOST, Federal Medical Centers. Article 1 2023 presidential poll, PDP replies Lai Mohammed. Sudan, Nigerians trapped between Sudan, Egypt, send SOS. These are the main stories here on this day.
And to the Daily Times. Niger Delta militants resume hostilities, bomb oil facility, issue more threats. And to other stories, 10th House of Reps leadership, opposition's numerical strength frightening APC. And May Day, workers' wages no longer sustainable, labor laments. And at the top, Anelka at loggerheads with NACO, SACO over 100% cargo height charges. And these are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Times.
All right. Next, the Daily Sun newspaper. The lead story there, fireworks over presidential poll. You lost woefully, FG tells LP and PDP. You have murdered sleep, LP tells APC. History will judge Buhari, that's the PDP. Southeast group clamors for Senate president, backs Kalu. Labour rejects planned privatization of NIPOST, TCN, FMCs. Adama Agoba, why I declared Binani winner, Yunusa Ari, state rec. FG accuses El-Rufai of placing Unity School students' lives in harm's way. Lagos explains demolition of buildings in Ajao Estate. You also have anxiety in Kano over planned review of Sanusi's deposition. That's that for the Daily Sun newspaper.
All right, these are the much we can bring to you at this time. We will take some time to drill deeper into some of the issues that have made the front pages. Starting with our students from Sudan, need I remind us that we'll be having a detailed conversation later on the show with inputs from people who are on the scene of the incidents, but I think we can just glaze over it a bit. There seem to be conflicting, like you did mention, signals from the Nigerian government. One of them is saying the evacuation has been delayed because of the CBN payment system. The other is saying Egyptian authorities are frustrating the evacuation process with demand for visa. The students are crying that they've run out of food, and you know that can cause. And then the ambassador is saying, "Do not attack our embassy." I wonder if we have a Nigerian embassy in the borders, in the deserts of Egypt. I mean, this clearly speaks to how uncoordinated this whole process clearly has been. It's been 5 days thereabout of what has been an absolute confusion. And like I did mention earlier, the government seemed to be just interested in explaining to us how much money they either have spent or are preparing to spend, and justifying why they have to spend that money, rather than showing, you know, really what efforts have been made. I mean, they describe those buses as luxury buses. The buses we saw are not different from the ones we see running from here to Lagos or from here to Onitsha, as the case, at the risk of calling the name of any service provider. What do you make of all of this conflicting and double information that we seem to be getting from?
Well, like you said, it's an indication of lack of coordination from among the officials that are responsible for this. We have NEMA talking to us. We have NIDCOM talking to us. We are supposed to also hear from the Sudan embassy, Nigerian Sudan embassy, and also the Nigerian Egypt embassy here. But I'm not hearing much from that end, which for me, I think that they should be the ones taking over a chunk of what is meant to be done to ensure that the evacuation of Nigerian students there. So I've not heard anything from the Nigerian Egypt embassy at the moment. Yesterday, we heard from the Sudanese ambassador, that's Nigerian Sudan ambassador, Nigeria's ambassador to Sudan, let me put it that way now. We heard from him where he was trying to absolve himself of all the allegations that we have heard. So we have heard from students who are there initially telling us that there have been an agreement between the Nigerian government and the bus drivers to convey those students from Khartoum to Egypt. And the cost of 40 buses, $1.2 million, just like the Nigerian government have told us. And part of the agreement is to disburse $400,000 initial payment so that they can provide the buses, move the students to Egypt, and then after getting to Egypt, the balance of $800,000 will now be paid, to the bus drivers. Only for us to see a video that went viral on social media, one of the students saying the bus drivers decided to stop in the middle of nowhere and saying that they are not going any further until they get their complete payment. And let's not forget that only 13 buses have so far taken the first batch of the Nigerian students. So we are talking 13 buses. We still have remaining 27 now buses still left that have not been provided. So what then happens? And then we are also hearing now that the students' passport have been taken by the bus drivers themselves. So they are in the middle of they are now in the border from what we learned. They are now in the border but have been denied access into Egypt. So they are somewhere there, hanging just somewhere in the bush, no water, no no food. As a human being, imagine being displaced for 2 weeks, not having access to water, not having access to proper food. Perhaps I can only imagine that they have to now rely on biscuits if they can find, to sustain themselves. So these are concerns really, and you can only imagine the trauma that is putting on the parents back here in Nigeria. You have from the information also that we've gotten that the Nigerian Air Force planes have landed in Egypt alongside Air Peace aircraft also in Egypt. But then the students are still at the border. So what kind of relationship really does Nigeria has between between our embassies in those countries and the
those are the absolute those are the questions that we clearly cannot run away from because Nigeria is not isolated in this case. We are aware that the Saudi Marines have arrived at the Red Sea point, and they are evacuating even citizens of other Americans were evacuated to Saudi and they're onward to the United States. What would have stopped Marines or navies from also sailing to that part of the world and evacuating from there if getting into Egypt was going to be any difficult? What makes it impossible for us to have gone to the same place the Americans and the Saudis are being evacuated and probably get a contingent plan out of that place? And like you rightly mentioned, what kind of relationship do we have with Egypt? Why is it difficult for the Egyptians to understand that this is a crisis situation and some kind of transit visa could be arranged to just get these people through. These students are not coming into Egypt to settle. It's just to see them through on a guided tour to the air facilities where they will be airlifted, where other onward arrangements have been made. So it questions the kind of relationship that we claim to have at a time when we are discussing the Continental Free Trade Agreement and the open skies in Africa. And the Foreign Affairs Minister briefed once, and that was it. This is squarely in the realms of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Whatever other agencies are supposed to do, they are supposed to do through the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs. So this whole explanation from the Nigerian ministry, where somebody seemed to be asking people to convert whatever payments they are making in dollar to, it doesn't speak of any seriousness by this government to arrest the situation there. It has moved from from a mere fear that people had about this government's irresponsiveness to a real situation where we now have thousands of students stranded in the middle for nowhere. And clearly, if they hadn't had any kind of access to internet to send out their plight, we would not have known. We would probably have just been relying on whatever the government tells us.
Yes, and Sunday, it even gets more worrisome when you think about the fact that the ceasefire ends, and so the ceasefire ends, what then happens? This is a country that has other rebel groups that we are not even talking about. What we know, at the moment is we know about the armed forces and the paramilitary, that's the rapid support forces. But there are other rebel groups, and there are other criminals who may even want to take advantage of the whole situation. So what then happens to our students in those places? So it goes back really also to, like you talked about, the relationship and the issues of diplomatic ties and the rest of them. Really, when we see these officials always traveling to countries to visit each other, Nigeria goes to Egypt, Egypt comes to Nigeria, and the rest, what exactly do they talk about? Isn't it for moments like this where there are difficulties? And isn't it a shame really that we are seeing a repeat of a worse situation of what happened when the Russia-Ukraine war started, and when Nigerian students were denied, or I would say Africans, not only Nigerian students, were denied at some point access to the neighboring countries, to safer zones, and then there was this priority and selective treatment that they got, at the borders, and now even in their own continent, where Nigerians are still facing the same
If you take it to Ukraine, that would be understandable. What can you even say in South Africa here, where we became victims of xenophobic attack? To get our students, it had to take the intervention of an airpiece, to get students back home. We need to begin to prioritize how we treat citizens in this country, and starting from home. Clearly, if we have placed a better premium on lives in this country, then we would understand the need for emergencies. We have fleets of warships, we have fleets of military planes. I don't understand this whole concept of waiting for diplomatic guarantees, whatever that means. Every time we come up with cliches that citizens find very difficult to understand. We're waiting for guarantees from a country that is fighting for its own survival. When the Americans have started evacuating, the Saudis have started evacuating, we were waiting for guarantees because we said to evacuate this kind of numbers were required. Well, I'm not sure whether we got the guarantees or not, but the situation is there's still a long way home for Nigerian students.
Yeah, there are other stories I'd like for us to, just to mention. Yesterday we saw a tragic, story that announced the killing of 40 people in Kebbi and Zamfara. That's quite a very sad one at a moment like this, just when we thought that, well, we are gradually moving away from that era, or those days where people are being killed in their numbers. We are seeing the story again. At some point, there was some quiet, there was some silence as to banditry attacks and kidnapping and the rest of them. But all of a sudden, it seems like there's a resurgence these days.
Some Nigerians, if you like, are beginning to develop a sense of isolation. It's beginning to feel that this government has completely lost with. to continue to sustain the fight, because as we moved towards the elections, the president repeatedly guaranteed that we will have a peaceful election. And to his credit, these issues were arrested, at least brought to the barest minimum. The elections held, which it does appear is the only interest of the elite. Now that they have gotten what they want, it appears that we are back in the trenches. We hope that the new administration already has plans to arrest this situation.
Well, other stories were mentioned Sunday, just before we go. The police officer that rejected 1 million naira, from is it ritualist or what? It's a 1 million naira bribe he rejected. On the flip side of it, we are seeing another police officer who got drunk to the point that he excreted in his uniform.
Yes, one brought honor to the force, the other one brought disgrace and shame. We hope that the authorities who are in charge of rewards and punishment will take note of these two parallel display by these policemen, and then appropriately reward the one who has brought glory to the uniform, to encourage similar dispositions by his other contemporaries. This is the much that time will allow us to look at this moment. We'll take a quick break. When we return at the top of the hour, the show continues. Please stay with us.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. We are not ending the show just yet. Ordinarily, this is the time where we say goodbye to you. But today we are ending the show at 10 a.m. And that's because the show has now moved from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., not 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. as it were. So take note of that for those who are just joining us. Welcome again. It is an hour into the show. Let's take a look at the headlines again. Stop total shutdown of varsities to make demand, Issa Aremu tells ASU and others.
Mayday Autumn thanks Benue workers loud their resilience and support.
CP orders arrest of drunk policeman who messed up self in uniform.
And to the details of the story, Director General of the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies, Ilorin, Comrade Issa Aremu, has cautioned trade union against total shutdown of tertiary institutions during strike actions. Speaking at a colloquium organized by the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, Federal University of Technology, Akure, he said the unions should understand that the industrial dispute was not industrial war. He reminded the varsity unions that former national president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Adams Oshomole, never gets any agreement from employers by shutting down a factory in their days as tester union leaders. He urged them to find ways to return to the good old days that would not lead to total closure of schools during strike actions. According to him, unions should imbibe the culture of social dialogue and be prepared for compromise. He said that is why they would not get what they always ask for.
All right, now, as Nigerian workers join the rest of the world to celebrate Workers' Day, Governor Samuel Ortom of Benue State has thanked Benue workers and commended them for their resilience and unalloyed support for his government over the years in the face of obvious challenges. While noting that the last 8 years had been challenging, the governor lauded the workers for keeping the will of the state alive. Governor Ortom, in a solidarity message to workers issued Sunday by his Chief Press Secretary Nathaniel Iku in commemoration of the 2023 Workers' Day celebration, said in spite of the harsh economic environment, Benue workers had remained undoubted and faithful. While thanking the Benue State civil servants for their hard work, dedication, and unwavering commitment to making the state a better place, he was honored to serve as their governor.
Well, that's it on our news highlights. And moving on to the packages on the federal government has given a breakdown of the $1.2 million spent on the bus fare to evacuate stranded Nigerians from Sudan to Egypt borders for onward airlifting to Nigeria. The permanent secretary of the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry and chair of the Situation Room on the evacuations of Nigerians from Sudan, Nasir Sani Gorzo, gave the explanation in Abuja. Dr. Sani Gorzo explained that $30,000 was paid per bus and that 40 buses were procured for the proper evacuation of stranded Nigerian citizens in Sudan. He also explained the delays experienced by Nigerians at the Egyptian border. It was due to delayed payment caused by the Central Bank of Nigeria and the request for visa payment by the Egyptian government. According to him, the owners of the buses demanded complete payment, noting that sending money to Sudan cannot be done directly but through middlemen. He quickly added that the Department of State Services and the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit had been carried along in the payment process.
All right, now we'll be taking more updates later.
For the buses. Do you know how much it takes to hire a bus from Khartoum to the border? $30,000 per bus. $30,000 per bus times 40 buses. Can somebody, any good mathematician amongst you? 1.2 million. That is not billion. Billion. Yes. That is where your 1.2 million comes into. We now mobilized the first tranche approved by federal government out of this, which is $400,000, and transferred it. If you take out $400,000, what does it come to?
800,000.
No, 1/3
Yes.
of the total. Once they gave us 13 buses, 13 buses times $30,000 is how much? 390. 30. Can somebody calculate for me?
That's 390 is correct, sir.
390. They stopped giving us. You remember I told you they gave us 13,000. They're supposed to give us 13 point something buses. They kept the 10,000. When you are traveling in Sudan, you don't enter a bus and start going. You must load it with water and biscuits. Yes. Believe me, I just became an expert on Sudan overnight because every day we discuss with them. And they told us our money is finished, bring another money. We now transferred the balance, started transferring the balance in tranches. And believe me, you don't transfer money to Sudan directly. You have to get somebody who knows the company who will transfer and give cash. Then you go into agreement. We signed an MOU. I have those signed MOUs with us. And at every stage, I report this to DSS and NFIU so that they can monitor the movement of the money. And so that, do you know that in Nigeria, if you transfer money from government account, it does not click because it has a dashboard that can be seen. They will stop it. So we had to alert them. And we sent this money, and it got delayed.
All right, now the National Population Commission, NPC, says it is prepared for the 2023 population and housing census, which has been postponed by the federal government. The Director of Public Affairs of the Commission, Isiaka Yahaya, disclosed this while addressing journalists. Take a look.
The National Population Director, Public Affairs, Isiaka Yahaya, said the NPC is fully prepared to carry out its functions, despite the rescheduling of the 2023 National Population and Housing Census. Yahaya dispelled insinuation that it was because the Commission was not financially prepared to carry out its responsibility that led to the postponement, adding that federal government has right to postpone the exercise and fix a new date. The Director of Public Affairs attributed the postponement to the rescheduling of governorship elections.
So the second point, it's also different from what is happening, the mood of the nation. Having conducted the election, we thought there would be, in fixing the census, the census after the election, we were just ready to move. So the issue of not being prepared is not a sort of it. Of course, you may say because we did not do the LGA training, maybe it means unprepared. Rather, the answer is no, because some of the thoughts that inform the postponement, were unfolding.
Census Manager Abubakar Jalingo, who also confirmed the Commission's readiness, added that database has to be attached to the population to get the required number of the population.
The National Population Commission is technically ready to implement the census. And I'm happy that you people are all familiar press to the Commission. You have followed our footprints to the process and to the methodological implementation of the census process.
Has been functional, while personnel recruitment has been scrutinized.
When you come to our preparedness in terms of internet connectivity and all this for the census, as I told you, we have the database of all network masts in this country. We know where they are physically located on ground in this country. We have collected the database of the coverage from all the telcos.
The Commission has put in place complaint portals and platforms to make Commission get back to the drawing board by receiving feedback and taking necessary corrections where necessary before the headcount. Kabir Lawal, Trust TV News, Abuja.
And following the postponement, residents of Jos, the capital of Plateau State, have expressed disappointment over the postponement of the 2023 populations and housing census. by the federal government. The 2023 census had been earlier scheduled for the 3rd to the 7th of May this year, but on Saturday, the federal government announced a shift in the date, adding that the new date will be decided by the incoming administration. Ado Musa completes the story.
This is the third time the federal government is postponing the exercise. Unlike the last postponement, this time no clear reason was given to Nigerians on why the exercise was postponed. Neither was a new date for the exercise selected. Census is usually organized to collect up-to-date data that will drive the developmental goals of the country and improve the living standard of the Nigerian people. However, some residents say the development is surprising and disappointing.
And honestly, I think the census, the postponement of the census is a very, very bad idea, because we need to know how many people we have in Nigeria, and you can't plan if you don't know the number of people you're planning for. For example, if you're planning an event, you have to know the budget or the number of people you're expecting to be able to plan well for them.
The saddest part of it is, yet no reason is given from the side of the government trying to convince the citizens that these are the reasons why this census is postponed.
The residents also call on the federal government to reconsider the decision and conduct the exercise as scheduled.
Since they've done everything already, I don't know what is stopping them from doing it. If possible, I think the federal government should go ahead and carry out the census. I don't know the exact reason why they are stopping it, but they should try and carry out the census.
They should try and intimate people about the reasons behind the postponement of this census, because people need to be convinced that there are cogent reasons for this census to be postponed for no reason.
Badamasi Saidu is a lecturer at the Department of Geography, Federal University Kashere, and explains why government should conduct the exercise at this present time.
In the first instance, when you are getting information about persons, you need to know the sex and ages of all categories of people in the country, because the need of the infants is quite different from the needs of children in primary school. The need of those in secondary schools is different from the need of those in the universities at that age group, and is equally different from the needs of the working class, and is equally different from the needs of the adults. So all these things are very much important in planning. The needs of females are also different from the needs of the males.
In the last 17 years, the federal government hasn't conducted the population and housing census to enable it to have accurate figure of the country's population for future planning. Ado Musa, Trust TV News, Jos.
All right, we'll now take a short breather. When we return, we'll begin our discussion today on the May Day. Join us again.
Welcome back. As promised from the beginning of this show, we are at that segment where we are going to be looking at the issue of the day, and in today's case, determined by the global celebration of Workers' Day. Today, Nigerian workers join their counterpart around the world to celebrate Workers' Day, Labor Day, or also known as the International Workers' Day. It's celebrated on May 1 every year in many countries around the world. This day is dedicated to working class and their contributions to society. The history and evolution of Labor Day is a story of the struggle and the triumph of labor movement. We have in the studio the spokesperson of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Mr. Benson Upa. It's nice to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
I was saying that he looks like a Gen Z worker representative when he came into the studio, and that looks nice on you, by the way.
Really?
And of course, we have Dia Ugli, public affairs analyst and civil rights activist on gender. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio, ma'am.
It's nice having me here.
A beautiful compliment, if you like, that we have in the studio. We will begin with you. I dare to say, Mr. Benson, not for the purpose of gender superiority, so that I don't fall foul of my sister's protection line.
Yeah.
It's another Workers' Day.
Yes.
And I'm sure from here you'll be prepared to join all of the activities that have been lined up to celebrate today's Workers' Day. But to put it straight, is there anything to celebrate about the 2023 Workers' Day if we take a quick x-ray of how workers have fared in the last 8 years?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. No matter how badly things have turned out to be, somehow, somewhere, there is always something good, something nice. Of course, for workers, it's been a tough period, but we are grateful to be alive. We are grateful to see this day, and these are sufficient reasons to celebrate.
Okay, but how would you say that the Nigerian workers have fared under the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration?
Well, I would say the statistics speak for themselves. First, let me start with the negative. But do I start with the positive side of it?
Either ways.
Okay. At the moment, we have 131 million Nigerians considered to be multidimensionally poor. We have 40% unemployment rate and still growing. We have 53.4% of youth unemployment. We have 22.04% inflation rate from 21.9. We have a growing oil theft in the Delta. We have had massive devaluation of the Naira that has created uncontrollable inflation, as I've mentioned earlier on. All this have negatively impacted on the wage capacity of the worker, everything about the worker. Energy bills, utility bills have been on the rise. In fact, reached a level now where no notice is given as required by law. You recall in those days, if they were going to take light, they will give you 3 to 4 days notice that light will be taken in so place. Now nobody talks about that. Bills, the I mean, the entities that run the electricity distribution just simply pile up bills, the water board slams bills, all the utility agencies. All these have impacted very, very negatively and have reduced life to a bohemian, a Hobbesian level. Life is mean, brutish, and short, as it were.
Thank you. Coming to you.
However,
finish your thought.
Good. However, we should also be fair to this administration, to President Muhammad Buhari, in assessing and giving our understanding. When he came in, he approved the release of funds to the states to enable them offset the backlog of salaries and pensions. Most of the governors that took this money put it to something else. They didn't use the money. They didn't apply the money. President Muhammad Buhari also, in the period of COVID, when the global outlook was bleak, the national outlook was equally bleak. He made sure that no worker was retrenched or laid off. Beside this, he approved the length of service for teachers from 60 years to 65 years. Recently, he has just approved a wage dash. These are some of the things that we should be appreciative of. And we're grateful to him. So it has not been one long night. So it has been night and day. This will be our take.
It's good that you bring all of these perspectives to bear. With Ms. Ogli, he said something that is instructive. I know the experience, even for labor in Nigeria, is not equal for the male and female. There seems to be some kind of discrimination lurking here and there. I will give you the opportunity to speak with that, given your background. But what has the experience been for you from the point of observation between how some of the things the presidents have done for labor versus how the governors have behaved? And to be fair, I would like to start with your own state governor, who is thinking of giving himself some wonderful sign-off in the name of gratuity and pension for ex-governors in a state where teachers are owed cumulative salaries of well over 24 months in the last 4 years. What's your assessment of how governors have behaved when it comes to workers' welfare generally?
Thank you so much. I think the governors have behaved very responsibly because the bedrock of any society lies with the workforce. Like you rightly said, in my state where I'm from, the governor has been most insensitive to the plight of the average worker in the state. Teachers have gone months on ending without being paid. There are no incentives for the workforce, and there's just a natural feeling of irresponsibility towards the workforce. And it is totally unacceptable. It should not continue. Like you said, he's working on giving himself a lifetime retirement plan. And I asked myself, how much work have you put in to want to earn so much for the rest of your life, where the average worker has not been paid sometimes for years? So it is actually quite irresponsible and should not be encouraged going forward. That's my take.
Okay, well, a lot has happened in the past 8 years. Like you said, there are global dimensions to some of the issues that we are battling with in the country, especially if you look at the inflation. So I would direct this to you now, Mr. Benson. All the interventions of the government,
yes,
how effective are they really in the face of all this, all that we have seen in terms of the inflation rates? And then I would also go further to say, as regards the minimum wage, where are we? Have we seen 100% implementation yet?
Well, thank you very much for this question. Well, as per the issue of interventions, we should try to try to scale this up. Is this state, is this federal government you're looking at? Or we assume that this is all federal government?
For both of them, because we are talking about workers in the entire country.
For both of them?
Yes.
Well, I will start with the federal government. The federal government put in place palliative measures, some of them which are directly under the Minister of the social welfare?
No, humanitarian.
Humanitarian welfare and so on and so forth. And they gave out sums of money to some individuals.
They said they are indigent individuals.
Indigent individuals. There were other initiatives, including anchor borrowers and things like this. Are the ones that, well, some people benefited from the anchor borrowers initiative. But what I would say generally is that that the spread and the depth of what they did weren't good enough. People are given the volume of a population, more should have been given, more resources should have been allocated.
You know, I'm pointing to this because
yes,
there are several interventions by the federal government, and you could even say that in the past, I mean, perhaps we've not seen a government that have had the highest number of social welfare interventions like we've seen in this country. But you mentioned that we have over 100 million Nigerians, 133 million Nigerians, multidimensionally poor. So it means that with all these interventions, are we really seeing the desired results? And if not, where are we not getting it right?
Well, let me say that first and foremost, I'm not the spokesperson of this administration, but let me say that as you pointed out, it was thoughtful of the administration to have even contemplated interventions, as it were. However, as I said earlier on, those interventions were not sufficiently widespread or deep enough. And there were complaints. You remember at a point that the National Assembly caused, they call it an investigation, okay? That was suggestive of dissatisfaction with the implementation, okay? So at that level, I would say yes, the intentions were good, but the implementation or the implementations were not sufficiently good. And time has come, in light of this, time has come for us to reflect. What did we do right? What didn't we do right? Okay? So these, for me, are the issues that we should begin to look.
The other leg of the question is about the minimum wage and its implementation.
Yeah, the minimum wage. Yeah, the minimum wage came into effect November 2019. And quite unfortunately, even though my sister here said the governors did well, no, I hold... I thought I heard her say that... I thought I heard you say that the governors that they performed well. No. Okay.
No, you heard wrongly.
Just give us your take.
Okay, fine. So, quite unfortunately, some of the governors obeyed this law in the breach. The national minimum wage issue was and still remains a law. Okay? And all the strata of governments, from the local government, state government to the federal, they were expected to obey this law. It was and still remains a national law. And in most countries of the world, the national minimum wage is the benchmark below which no employer is allowed to pay. Most organizations, most states pay above the national minimum wage in the United States and where this law is practiced. But quite unfortunately, many governors took delight in violating this law, did not pay. And some that paid, they paid in tranches. So, and by so doing, they deepened the poverty in their states. Now, let me share this story with you. I had an encounter with a governor in the northwestern state who wanted to stop paying the minimum wage. And I told him, I said, do you know why there is relative peace in your state? Let me tell you. It's because there is relative prosperity. So there is a nexus between prosperity and security.
All right.
Once you take out this, once you stop paying, your state will descend into a state of anomy, like the contiguous states.
All right. At the risk of interjecting with your thoughts, I would like Mr. Blade to intervene, but in a different sort. You talked about a time for introspection. Whenever we look at the budget, one of the things that keep growing on the budget is the recurrent expenditure, wherein lies the budget for personnel in Nigeria. Nigerians who are neither employed by the state or federal government keep wondering whether they are a part of this country, because it appears that a chunk of what we earn as a country is used in servicing civil servants. And the arguments are in two folds. It feels like a very small size of our population seem to take everything that we earn as a country. And secondly, it also feels like Nigerians, you and I who are not in public and civil service, do not get value for some of these payments that are made. And they also feel like there is just too many of them, in fact, that we can do with just a third of the size of our civil service. What's your take on these arguments out there?
Looking at it very critically, the arguments out there are quite in order, they're in place. Because when you look at it, in all the economies of the world, Nigeria happens to be one of those that have the highest
bureaucracy.
Yes. And it is not trickling down. When you earmark so much for so little, the average man, the average worker, does not feel the impact. In public service, for example, we have all manners of schedule that ought not to be. These schedules could be collapsed if we are looking at public service the world over. There are different arms of governance, public service, that ought not to be so multifaceted. And in being multifaceted, it comes with a lot of expenditure, which could, ordinarily, I don't know if that's the word I should use, but which could best be put to other uses. And those uses could affect day-to-day lives of the workers. He was saying something about, you talked about palliatives and things. What would have stopped the government? You know how many staffs you have per establishment? It failed because it didn't go through the right channels. In this establishment, we know how many people are employed herein. Take this establishment, for example. palliatives want to come in here, you know who gets what and who shouldn't get what. You don't just make it on a blanket, you know. It's the palliatives were distributed from Australia to Togo, from America. It was a global thing. So why was ours different? Bureaucracies. And this has to be looked into very critically in the years to come, especially as we are transiting from one administration onto the other.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to respond to the issues you just mentioned.
Okay.
First, I hold a contrary view that so much is given to those in the public service to the exclusion of others. First, I do agree that in relation to the overall population, those in the public service are relatively a relative minority. But I do not believe that the allocations to those career public servants are the issue, because the facts and figures are there. How much is voted for their wages? First of all, how many are they? Yeah, we're talking about a country of about over 200 million. How many people are in public service? If you do a census of this,
maybe 40 million or so, 50 million. How many workers do you have, attached to an office?
So just a moment. If you do a census of this, you'll be surprised. Let's take the example of the police. We are told that we are under-policed. We are under-soldiered too. We are virtually, practically in all the services, our numbers in relation to the public, our numbers are low. But look at how much is actually voted. So the issue is not these career public servants. The issue is the political heads. Okay. So I'm coming. Just a moment. If you get to look at how much those political heads take, you'll be shocked. So the fact is there in the open. Go and take a look. What percentage does the salary of this, or do the salaries of these entities constitute?
Okay, well, I think that the argument is about how much does the ordinary Nigerian benefit from the national cake, sort of, the quote national cake. So Mike Wanko talked about when we look at the budgetary allocations, and for most times you see that recurrent expenditure takes a chunk of it.
And then we're not going to separate it from career and non-career.
You don't see that much investment in terms of capital capital projects that is meant to benefit the larger population of the people. But let me bring it down to the NLC, for instance. For most times that we talk about welfare of staff, it's always almost about people in the public service. How much attention or how much focus is given to private sector workers, for instance? I mean, we have people who work hours on end today, some of them without salaries, some of them their employers pay at will. Sometimes there is no arrangements for their perhaps pensions or health schemes and the rest of it. So as a labor union, how much attention does the labor union give to people in the private sector?
To its members.
First and foremost, I think there is a misuse of term here when you say private sector. I mean, the private sector is better organized than the public sector.
Okay. But we're talking labor in general.
Listen, madam, listen. The private sector is better organized and better paid than people in the public sector. Except
that can be debated.
I'm trying to explain something to you which will be useful to you. Except we are talking about the informal sector. if you are talking about the informal sector, where the rules are a little bit unsteady, sometimes there are no rules at all, that you may have a point there. But if you're talking about the organized private sector, I mean, the organized private sector prides itself as a golden eye of everything.
Okay, so
the people. In fact, let me tell you.
When you talk, because it's almost. There's a very thin line between.
Tell me any employee in the organized private sector who is not paid and
there's a very thin line between the informal sector nowadays and the organized private sector, because it's almost difficult to say, oh, this is organized private. So you take teachers, for instance, who work in private schools, for instance. You say they are working in a private, or you say they are working in organized private sector. And if you see some of the treatments of these teachers in private schools, you know, sometimes it's really nothing to be proud of. It leaves a lot to be desired.
Just to add
that's
to
just
that
an instance.
point,
Would you say they are working in informal sector now, or how?
Just to give you one more example, the banks, casualization of staffs, contract appointments that denies them of pension, denies them of health insurance
benefits,
and they work under very severe. So does the structure we have today better serve the interests of workers in those kind of establishments?
Well, if you are talking about inherent labor issues in certain organizational spaces, that is a different matter. We can deal with that. But if you are saying that the organized private sector is a marginalized sector, I'll keep telling you, I say no. That the organized private sector, Shell and the rest, they're all part of the organized private sector. And they are very, 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 in terms of pay, remuneration, and those, they are way ahead of the public sector. But if you are now restricting your question to unhealthy labor practices in certain entities in the private sector, I will agree with you. Like the banks, for instance, yes, we have had massive cases of casualization in the banks, and we'll be tackling this. We have that in the construction industry. We'll be tackling this. In fact, in the most recent tour of the unions by the president of the Congress, Comrade Joe Ajero, he made it amply clear to the unions that he visited, say, look, we are reconstituting the anti-casualization committee to drive home the message that casualization is not allowed. It's not the right way to go. So Congress has consistently taken a very strong view of unhealthy labor practices like casualization.
What about remuneration? What about benefits?
If you're talking about remuneration in the private sector, and I'm telling you, take this from me. Even the banks where you have unhealthy practices, if you're looking at the issue of the pay, they pay better. But casualization is an issue. Pension issues are an issue.
They pay better.
So try to separate them.
No. Yeah, exactly.
We seem to be lumping up things, really. And I think that it will help us in the conversation if we, not talk about maybe banks, or maybe we are just talking about unhealthy, you mentioned it, unhealthy labor practices. And that exists,
But that was not the direction of your question. That was not the direction of your question.
We're talking about unhealthy labor practices, whether in the informal sector, whether in the organized private sector, like you put it. Unhealthy labor practices exist in different places. But what I'm saying is that the attention of labor, for instance, seems to be more focused on people working in the public sector. Each time there is...
That is not true.
Well, that's why you are here.
That is not true.
Each time there is
that
disagreement between government, that's where we hear labor. But how about people who are not working in the public civil service? So, and that's why you're here. Tell us.
I'll tell you. So listen and I'll tell you.
The focus of labor,
let me tell you,
has been done to look at, say, for instance, I'm giving an instance with schools now, for instance. Private schools now, for instance, where you see this unhealthy labor practices. What is the labor doing in that regard?
Are you ready to listen to me now?
Go ahead.
First and foremost, the private sector unions are as many, if not more than the public sector unions that constitute the umbrella known as NLC. That should tell you that NLC is a broad-based labor center, the leading pan-Nigeria organization. So any issue that affects any of these unions, NLC takes it upon itself. You see, NLC does not even have any choice. The issue of the banks, we have fought and we're still fighting. The issue of the teachers that you mentioned, yes, we have a union known as the Nigerian Union of Teachers.
And the TUC.
But also take note,
whatever.
It is often easier for NLC to intervene where there is a union. Okay? It's always easier. Where there is no union, what NLC does is to encourage unionization. Okay? So, but there must, oftentimes, there has to be that initiative of having a union. And take note of this too. If those who are negatively affected, like you mentioned, teachers in private institutions and so forth, if they do not show any inclination of forming a union, or if they do not run to NLC, NLC will not throw itself.
No, but NLC should go to them. Labor.
Why?
Why not? Why not?
Okay, so I have this question as
why not?
Ask me.
I ask this question as follow-up, and I would like to start with Mr. Glee to sort of offer a perspective, and perhaps you'll find a room to respond. One of the other grievances held by several other Nigerians who are not members of the NLC, either by affiliation or directly, is the fact that in the recent years, the NLC has also made itself a tool against reforms that are considered to be in the general public interest, but not in the interest of the NLC, because some of its staff members will be retrenched. Like, we know how, that's what I'm saying. I've said, like, I wanted to end with an example.
Yeah.
Like reforms in the oil sector. The NLC has completely stood against any attempt at privatization, any attempt at a conversation around subsidy removal and all of that, because for them, the privatization, because for them it will lead to retrenchment. But we have now had refineries where people have moved from ordinary staff to directorate position between the year 2000 and today without those establishments producing any ounce of petroleum. Is that the kind of economy that will sustain the plight of workers, or is that what we yearn for? I would like your perspective on that before he responds. You've been talking for a while. I just want a perspective.
Much more than anything else, taking it from the stance of the NLC, I think the NLC has fallen short. I'm sorry to say.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Because much more than anything else, when we talk about labor, we're talking about everybody who is engaged in service provision. Service provision. Organized, unorganized, formal, informal. That's why it's called labor. Whatever it is the responsibility of the labor council or whatever to look out for them. Be it the vulcanizer, his said something. They always want to, work around unions. But then, what if they don't even know? What if they don't know? Everybody must not be, a white-collar labor provider before you identify with them. And then, like you rightly said, quoting you, a bit of the national cake. It's not done in other economies, even third world economies like us. It's not done in Ghana. So for crying out loud, Nigerian Labour Congress, as it is, has not actually lived up to its responsibility when it comes to yes, that's one. Two, like you asked the question, they have been compromised because they look at it like, oh, if this happens, if we delve into this more, our members are going to be out of jobs. So they're not even looking at the overall benefit for all Nigerians. For all Nigerians. You took, a piece out of the bulk by saying oil subsidy, privatization. What are these bringing to the table for us? As the labor, you should go into that
nitty-gritty.
Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
For all Nigerians.
All right, so let's give this time to...
Well, thank you very much, Madam. You'll be most callous with your language, but I will not respond in the same whatever, that will be compromised, that we would not live up to expectations, all of that. Yet, if a leaf drops today, you will say, where is labor? Why don't you call another organization if you've not been living up to our expectations? But but coming to the specific issues that the two of you have raised, you talked about saying that we have been anti-reform. Well, that is an unfair comment. We have not been anti-reform, but we are not for fraudulent reforms. You see, with the collapse of the bipolar world in the late 80s and early 90s, market took a predominance, took an eminent position, virtually across the world, including Nigeria. And when they started market reforms here, we said, learn your lesson from what has happened in other climes. Don't just go market because going market is the fad of the moment.
If you can wrap up, sir. Because
they didn't listen. No, this is very fundamental. Yeah. Give me time.
Yeah,
they didn't listen.
We don't have the time. That's the thing. So
they didn't listen. I mean, they privatized energy. What do you have today?
We have the discourse.
What do you have today? And then two, they say that we're against the privatization of the oil sector. We said no, we are not. We said for you to privatize or to deregulate the downstream sector of the oil something, do ABCD. Build refineries, fix these refineries. Let there be competition between publicly owned refineries and the privately owned. As I speak with you, we have done documents, well-researched documents, and submitted to government on what to do. Subsidy is a scam. Even the president, before he was sworn in president, said that he didn't believe in subsidy.
Okay.
Just a moment. So, subsidy, and for those of you who are advancing, who have become converts of market fundamentalism, it is coming. When you start buying fuel at the price of 1,000 naira a liter, you start appreciating the Nigerian Labour Congress. Thank you very much, Mr. Benson. I wish we had more time to continue to drill into several aspects. I just need to put on records that there are various perspectives on these issues and arguments, and all of us seek a better Nigeria, regardless of what side of the divide we are sitting. Thank you very much for showing up, Mr. Benson. I hope we will have time to continue this conversation after today. Mrs. Ogley, thank you very much for showing up and for bringing this team that you brought to this show.